Lamborghini models. Forbidden to ordinary people. It seems contradictory, but it's the purest truth. There are Lamborghinis that aren't prohibited due to lack of money, but rather due to excessive access. While many people believe that luxury is only a matter of price, the reality is much more uncomfortable. There are cars you may desire, research, dream about, and yet you will never be able to buy them. Not because you lack the money, but because you lack permission, the necessary history, and, above all, the right profile. The curious thing is that nobody teaches this. We grow up believing that success solves everything, that paying a high price opens any door. But at certain levels, the higher you climb, the more rules appear, silent, invisible, and unforgiving. Lamborghini understood something that goes beyond engines. True luxury isn't what's shown, it's what's kept private. And this logic applies not only to cars, but to status, opportunities, and even relationships. Perhaps the most provocative point is this. What if what prevents you from accessing certain levels of life isn't effort or money, but behavior, mindset, and long-term vision? By understanding why some Lamborghinis are literally off-limits to ordinary people, you begin to see patterns that repeat themselves in other areas: business, success, and power. And that's exactly where this story starts to get interesting. The idea of forbidden, why some Lamborghinis simply aren't for everyone. When we talk about Lamborghini, many people imagine only speed, aggressive design, and an unrealistic price. But look, the real forbidden part begins well before the price tag. There's an invisible layer of unspoken rules, silent filters, and subjective criteria that separate those who can pay from who may possess. It's no exaggeration. There are cars that the brand simply doesn't want to sell to just anyone, even if the money is right there, clean and upfront. This idea of prohibition is not a product of chance, but of pure strategy. Lamborghini understood early on that exclusivity is not created solely through a scarcity of units, but through a scarcity of access. It's like a closed club where the doorman looks not only at the bank balance, but also at the behavior, the posture, the history, and even the way the buyer relates to the brand. There have been cases of people being barred for excessive ostentation or for trying to turn the car into a vulgar spectacle, something that, for the brand, dilutes its symbolism. Think of it as a simple analogy. It's not enough to have a ticket to the opera. You need to know how to sit, listen, and respect the environment. Similarly, Lamborghini doesn't just sell a car. It sells an image, a narrative, and a legacy. And it's precisely this mentality that opens up an interesting loop. If there's already prohibition in the concept, imagine what happens when we enter the territory of limited series, those that almost no one even sees. Advertised. The secret world of limited editions, models that disappear before reaching the public. There's a whole universe within Lamborghini that almost no one sees because it doesn't appear on websites, dealerships, or advertisements. These are the limited series that are sold out immediately, often even before they're officially revealed. By the time the public discovers them, it's too late. All the units already have owners, hand-picked, as if the brand were setting up a silent chessboard, where only a few names matter. Here, the game changes completely. It's not the buyer who chooses the car, it's the car that chooses the buyer. Discreet invitations, private meetings, closed presentations in showrooms away from the cameras. Everything happens on an almost conspiratorial level. Those inside have usually already bought several previous models, kept the car original, respected the brand's aesthetics, and, above all, never tried to draw more attention than the car itself. It's like an auction that takes place without a gavel, without an audience, and without open bidding. Whoever is there has already been approved long before. And this provokes a curious reflection. If there are Lamborghinis that disappear before they are even seen, What about those that, besides being rare, can't even be driven on the streets? That's exactly where the story starts to get even more absurd and fascinating. Lamborghini Sesto Elemento, the car so light and so powerful that it was banned from the streets. The Lamborghini Sesto Elemento, it wasn't designed for traffic, and that's clear from the very first detail. It was born with an almost unhealthy obsession with lightness, carbon fiber everywhere, an absence of traditional comfort, and a brutal performance philosophy. The result? A car with such an aggressive power-to-weight ratio that it simply doesn't fit the common traffic regulations. It's no exaggeration to say that it was conceived as a track weapon, not as a means of transportation. Here's a point that's rarely discussed. Safety isn't just about brakes and airbags, but about predictability. The Sesto Elemento accelerates, responds, and behaves in a way that demands above-average reflexes and experience. On normal streets, with pedestrians, potholes, and unexpected events, it becomes a real risk, not only to the driver, but to everything around them. Therefore, the ban isn't a punishment. It's almost an honest admission that the car has exceeded the limits of civilized use. It's curious to think that some owners are willing to pay millions for something they can't freely use. They know they haven't bought a car, but a manifesto. It's like owning a work of art that can't be touched, only contemplated. And this logic leads to an inevitable question. What if there was a Lamborghini that, besides being banned from the streets, couldn't even be kept in the owner's garage? Well, that next level exists. Lamborghini Essenza SCV12, the private club where the car never goes home. The Essence SCV12. This takes the concept of exclusivity to an almost surreal level. Here, the owner buys the car, pays millions for it, and still can't take it home. The model is stored in an exclusive hangar under the care of the company itself. Lamborghini, it's like a living museum piece. Access is only available on specific days, at selected locations, with an entire operation set up by the brand. This completely changes the logic of ownership. The buyer isn't exactly an owner, but a member of a closed club, where the privilege isn't about driving whenever you want, but rather about to be able to direct dedicated mechanics, engineers monitoring every use, maintenance done as if the car were always in racing condition. It's a level of control that seems excessive until you understand that this car was made to exist at the limit, and only there. Now think about it. What kind of person agrees to invest a fortune in something they can't even park in their own garage? The answer isn't simply ego, but the desire to belong to a circle that almost nobody knows exists. And when you accept that kind of rule, it becomes easier to understand why some models go even further, giving up even basic things that make a car drivable in the everyday world. Aventador J, the Lamborghini without a roof, without a windshield, and without compromises. The Aventador Jet looks more like a crazy auto show concept than a real car, and in a way, that's exactly what it is. It was created without a roof, without a windshield, and without any concern for basic traffic rules. No comfort, no protection against wind or debris. The message was clear. This is not a car for the real world. It's an extreme statement of design and audacity. Lamborghini. When someone buys something like this, they're not looking for utility, but a narrative. It's like hanging a rare painting in the living room knowing it will never match the sofa. And it doesn't need to. The Aventador J exists to be seen, discussed, and remembered. It breaks with any expectation of automotive common sense and assumes its role as a unique piece, made to provoke and divide opinions, not to please. And here's an interesting point. If there are cars created not to be driven, but simply to exist, what happens when Lamborghini decides to make something even more personal, tailored for a single individual? When the model ceases to be merely rare and becomes exclusive to a single person. It is in this territory that luxury ceases to be a product and becomes a personal signature. Custom-made models for billionaires, when the buyer chooses everything except the right to drive. There comes a point where luxury stops following a catalog and starts following personal desires. That's where projects come in. One-off created on demand for clients who have proven over the years that they understand the game of exclusivity. Lamborghini, it opens the door, listens to desires, adjusts proportions, materials, colors, and even concepts, but imposes clear limits. Curiously, in some cases, the buyer chooses everything, except when and where they can drive. These cars are so extreme that the brand itself establishes rules for their use. It's not punishment, it's protecting the narrative. A very specific engine, almost racetrack-level aerodynamics, materials too sensitive for regular asphalt. The owner accepts it because they understand they're not buying freedom, but identity. It's like having a bespoke suit made knowing it can only be worn on very rare occasions. Precisely for that reason, it's worth more. This type of relationship reveals something profound about power and control. Those who reach this point no longer need to prove anything to anyone. And this raises an intriguing question. If even billionaires accept restrictions, who ultimately decides who can buy and who should stay out? The answer lies within a silent, almost invisible filter that few know about. Who decides who can buy? The invisible list of approved buyers. Few people realize it, but it's not the dealership manager who has the final say. There's a silent mechanism behind the decisions, made up of executives, brand curators, and carefully analyzed historical data. Lamborghini observe everything. How many models the client has owned, how they cared for them, whether they respected their originality, and most importantly, how they behaved in public. Here, reputation weighs as much as assets. This invisible filter acts as a test of maturity. People who buy cars just to show off, excessively modify them, or turn their car into a display of ostentation are usually discreetly ignored in future releases. Those who understand the value of silence, preservation, and long-term planning end up being remembered. It's like in a circle of experienced investors. Those who talk less and act wisely receive more opportunities. The most curious thing is that nobody receives a letter saying, "You're in," or "You're out." The invitation simply arrives, or it doesn't. And this lack of explanation creates even more desire and mystery. But this leads us to a final, almost uncomfortable question. Do these prohibitions exist for safety and technical reasons, or are they simply the most refined form of marketing ever created? That's where everything connects to the next point. The real reason for the ban: security, power, ego, or marketing. Ultimately, the word forbidden carries more layers than it seems. Of course, there's the technical issue. Cars that are too extreme for ordinary streets, real risks, physical limitations that don't fit into everyday life. But reducing everything to safety would be naive. Lamborghini. It understands something that few brands master. Human desire grows when it encounters barriers. A well-placed no is worth more than 1,000 advertisements. There's also the psychological factor. When something can't be easily bought, it ceases to be an object and becomes a symbol. The ego comes into play, but not in a vulgar way. It comes in as a sense of belonging. It's not about showing you have money, it's about showing you were chosen. It's the same logic as exclusive clubs, closed invitations, and rooms where only a few can enter. The fewer people there are, the more value it seems to have. And here comes the troubling question. If tomorrow Lamborghini decided to release everything, sell to anyone, without filters, without rules, would these cars still be desired in the same way? Probably not. The prohibition, at its core, sustains the myth. And understanding this completely changes how one perceives luxury, success, and access. A thought process that begins with cars, but ends up reflecting on the very lives of those who watch. What do these Lamborghinis teach us about access, choices, and level of play? After all this, the question that remains isn't about cars, but about you. How many doors in your life seem closed, when in reality they require a different level of attitude, consistency, and long-term vision? The banned Lamborghinis show that at certain levels, victory isn't about who runs the fastest, but who maintains the right behavior for the longest time. Luxury, power, and access follow rules that almost no one talks about, and those who ignore them usually remain on the outside. Now think honestly. If you had access to something extremely valuable today, would you be prepared to maintain, care for, and respect it in the long term? Or would you use it all at once, just to prove something to others? This reflection applies to money, career, relationships, and rare opportunities. The game changes when you stop trying to impress and start taking a stand. If this content has helped you see success from a different perspective, imagine what else you can learn by going deeper. So tell me, what in your life is still forbidden because you haven't adjusted your mindset? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning about the inner workings of luxury, power, and the decisions that separate ordinary people from those who play on another level.